Hey guys, welcome. We're just going to have a quick look at the settings in RaceHQ. So I'm currently using Race version 3.21.29 down the bottom here. That's telling me what version I'm up to. There's a few more bits and pieces on the screen which we can cover off in other videos, but we're just going up here to settings to go and have a look at what is in the settings. What can I expect to find up here? So let's just start with general. So these are all the things to do with obviously general settings, but there's some hardware type settings here, as well as any warnings, as in if I'm keying the number in on a race for an athlete and it's 256, is this athlete a known athlete? Is this the second time or more that I've keyed this same number in? Does the age, gender of this athlete match the other athletes in the same race? Some people run particular age, gender races, and so those sorts of things will help. Some clubs or some people just run everyone together in the one race, so that would be a pain having those options on. So that's what those options are. If I'm looking to play with my hardware, do I want to remember the units? As in, I've got a front straight set of gates and I've got a back straight set of gates. Do I want this computer to remember that pole 1 is always in position A, pole 2 is always in position B, and so on, so I don't have to, so it can just help for some people to know that those poles always go in the same position. And I want to remember the way the poles or the start devices are set up. Also that I want, using the pre-configured list, I want all my gates and my start devices to only ever talk to this laptop unless I change this setting. So I would come in here and I would turn on my different devices to kind of pair them up, like with Bluetooth, like your phone to your car, that sort of thing. Only my gates and my start devices will be able to talk to my laptop. That then allows anyone on the back straight to be able to do the same, and now the front straight and the back straight won't be cross-talking if we're both in the setup screen together. This way you can kind of protect yourselves from having accidental crosstalk if you happen to both be in the same setup screen at the same time. Then that would just help with that. Then there's things here, the initial ignore period. When the race starts, we normally have an ignore period. The default is 5 seconds. So in the first 5 seconds, no one will be able to record a time. If they come through the gates, has to allow for at least 5 seconds. This is handy, particularly for a 400 meter race where somebody is in lane 1 normally, in a normal 400 meter track. So we don't get a time in lane 1 of half a second, or depending on how quick it is before they leave lane 1. If we have a 5 second ignore period, then in the first 5 seconds, hopefully that athlete has left lane 1 for a 400 meter race within that time frame. The start device microphone sensitivity. Do I want to make my cap gun more reliable or less reliable? If I make this low sensitivity, then it means the cap has to be louder for the start device to acknowledge it as a start. If I want to make it more sensitive to the noise, then I'll change this up to high, which means obviously potentially I could get false starts if I put the start device down on a hard surface accidentally a bit too hard. That could start a race because the microphone is more sensitive. It has a higher sensitivity to noise in its environment. So have a play with that if you need to, but otherwise leave it as the default. What noise do I want the computer to make when a race starts? Some people like having a beep or a bang. Other people don't like any noise. Me personally, the beep's my preference when a race starts, and I like to hear that so I don't have to look at the screen to know that the race has started. And if you're running the digital start device, do you want the speakers to make a beep or a bang noise? So that's where you change that. And then there's a little setting here, start device trigger tone enabled. So if you're running a start device, sometimes because it's only for starting, you don't want the trigger button to make a noise, in which case use this text, this little tick box. and so the starter won't accidentally make a trigger noise, being a beep potentially, when they should have pressed the start button. So they press the wrong button. They should have pressed the start button, but they accidentally pressed the trigger button. You don't want people thinking the race has started because the starter pressed the wrong button. So if you untick this, if they accidentally click the trigger button instead of the start button, they won't get a tone out of the speakers and the athletes won't get a false reason to start a race. Bunch of other options up here. If you're using heats, the default is to not have any heat options, as in heat, semi-final, and a final. The default within the system from the cloud being RaceHQ down to here in the software is that everything is a heat. But let's say you've got a particular event where you are doing progressions from heats to semis and or finals, then you tick that on. If you're a school type event and you need to show divisions, division A, B, C, or relay or other things, then you tick that on as well. Otherwise, just leave those off. Some clubs want the reset event option enabled. So every time I've pressed save on a race, the event gets cleared in my drop-down list, meaning then I have to go and reselect the distance every single time a race is about to run. Some clubs like that, so it forces people to pay attention and make sure they know which event it is they're doing instead of being on autopilot, and meanwhile it's gone from 70s to 90s and no one's changed the events because they've just been happily running through races and not thinking they need to worry about that. Age, gender selection menu. So you don't have to say what age and gender the event is, because the moment you key an athlete's number in, it tells us what age and gender they are. But this option here, show age, gender, ties into these warnings down here. So you notify if an athlete does not match the age genders of other people in the event. That's what can help with that one. Otherwise, I generally leave that off. As long as we've got the right distance and we've got the right athlete number or name in an event, then we don't really need that one up there. Allow secondary race timer. So this is if I want to have overlapping races. Most people, when they get the gear for the first time, won't have this on because they just want to process one race at a time until they feel a bit more comfortable with everything. Once that's ticked on, however, you can start another race 5 seconds after the first race has begun. So classic is 200-meter race, because it's quite a long race, or a 400-meter race. It's a bit trickier because everyone's on the start line. But the race is halfway or 3/4 of the way through running and no one's walking. You could then allow the next race to start in the background to help get your volume of races through quicker. That's what that allows for. Ignore one beam trigger. There's an option in the the gates have 4 beams. You need 2 adjacent beams as a minimum before you will get a trigger from that lane. However, there's the bottom beam, so the lowest beam, one closest to the ground. If only that beam gets cut and nothing but no other beam within a second gets cut around the same time, then you will get a time on the screen, which is in theory from a little kid that was leaning forward and they just happened to cut only the bottom beam instead of the default 2 adjacent beams. If you don't care about that because you've got big kids, then you could ignore anything that comes from those beams. So if there happens to be birds in your area or dogs running around or those sorts of things that may give you false triggers because they've cut the bottom beam, then that's what that can help prevent. That just means your place, first, second, third, fourth, and so on will be on the screen. Obviously a good thing to have. If you're using our race lane setup up in the cloud, so you've gone and set up who is in what lane for which race, and you want to bring all that information down and use it on the day. So race 27, 9-male 100-meter race, heat 1, we have in lane 1 is Thomas Jefferson. Then lane 2 has Tom McFadden and so on. That sort of information, that's when you'd turn this on and it would bring that information down. Otherwise, leave that off. If you're using Meet Manager and you've gone and set up all the lane draws, like the above option here with the RaceHQ version, but you've done it in Meet Manager, and that Meet Manager happens to have the photo finish function enabled, then the timing gates can pretend to be Meet Manager for the day, in which case Meet Manager spits out 2 files, a names or a contact list, as well as a who's in what lane list. If you have this option turned on, when you get through the race screen, you'll be able to see a browse function, so you go and browse for one of those files. It will then pull that information in. Every time you press save at the end of the race, it will then save out a file that in theory has come from photo finish system, and Meet Manager will then know this and bring it in, bring the times back into Meet Manager to save somebody manually keying that in. These other ones here is more just for the RFID type scenarios, if you're using it as an attendance counter, or if you're letting people get their first time as they come through the start-finish arch is actually their start time, and then the second time they come through is actually their finish time, then that's what we'd be using there. Okay, so there's quite a few bits and pieces in general, which we've just had a talk through. The last one down the bottom here, by default, you'll be using RaceHQ, so pulling down all the web information. If, however, you want to run offline, here if you wanted to use the Excel option, then basically you would export out the simple template is what I'd normally recommend, fill in the necessary fields, then browse for that file once you've saved it, and then import it in and it'll bring your members in, which means obviously there'll be no RaceHQ functionality of uploading and points, calcs and so on, but that will then allow you to just run offline doing whatever it is you need to do there. The default, as you know though, is to use RaceHQ, so that's where you'd bring down the members, which takes us on to the web tab. So the web tab here is all about bringing members down. So if you want, you can have this tick box turned on so that it will automatically do a refresh or a login like this. If I press a button, it's going to go and bring down the latest members, PBs, records and so on. So it would do that step without me having to press this button when I start up the software. If I wanted to, I could also use the start line. So this is only if I'm using sprints where I have lanes set up and somebody's down at the start end of the track with a tablet or a phone, something with a browser. I'm down here at the finish line and I've got my RaceHQ also with internet. Then I could choose to use the web app, or we've got an app as in a local Android or iOS app that lives on your device, and we've also got the remote one, which isn't in full functionality yet, but that's there, a bit of a placeholder. So the main one that people would be using would be the web app. So that's what that functionality is about. So I'll just leave those off. When I press save, I want to upload my races. Yes, that's a pretty handy one. So if you want to get some live results or near live results, every time the race is finished and you press save and you've got internet, this would then go and push up that last lot of 6 lanes, 8 lanes, 12 lanes, whatever it is, worth of data up to RaceHQ. So in that way, within hopefully 5-10 seconds of the race finishing, you press save. The family and the athletes or the school carnival, whatever it is, would start to have more data incrementally added every time there's a new race. This option isn't available for everyone. It's a setting that needs to be turned on within RaceHQ. It's handy if you're a smaller centre or potentially a school where you don't have the time or you don't feel the need to go and set up a program as such. scenario is if you're a school, you just want to go and run some testing of some athletes, and you've had an opportunity to go and spend half an hour testing athletes, but you didn't want to go and set up RaceHQ, which is the default to allow data to be pushed up to RaceHQ from the timing software. If you have this turned on, then basically you can go and run whatever it is you want to run, as long as you're happy with the data. And if you turn that on, then it will be creating a date, event, age, gender program based on the information that you're trying to push up. So it's creating that template, or sorry, that program, so to speak, race by race every time you press save and you're uploading. So that's what that one's about. That's also handy if you're a really small centre. I know some centres that have 15, 20 kids turn up and they say, all right, what should we do? Let's go and do 100 metres and then we'll do some 800 metres and then we're done for tonight. Versus it could have been some other combination. So instead of having to program in every single event to allow for any possible event to be run on the night, by turning this on, again, it goes and creates that program on the fly as they're uploading. If we're using handicaps, so this can be for sprints as well as pack, and in particular for RFID, where you may have wave starts. The first pack of people leave off at 0 when the race starts. The next pack of people, or the next wave, is 4 minutes later, and so on. Then that's where you'd want to potentially upload your handicap times, or not potentially, you would, so that it's not the time that I cross the line, it's the time that I cross the line minus whatever my wave or handicap time was, is what gets recorded. That also could be for sprints where you're running a handicap event where you're a 400 meter race, for example, you let the slowest person off at 0 and the fastest person takes off at 20 seconds into the race, and they're all trying to catch up and hopefully finish around the same time. So that's what that's to do with. If you're using the RFID and you actually want live results streaming up to the web area, not the normal web area, but another different sort of web area, then that's where you turn this on. So it's maybe an adventure race or a triathlon or something like that. You want people to be able to monitor who's gone through which checkpoint at which time and how they're tracking. Then that's what that option is. And it gives you some times of delay. So just like with broadcasting, how they have a delay from things being said to things being broadcasted in case somebody says the wrong words, that they've got time to edit it. If you leave this up to say 15-20 seconds and somebody crosses through that shouldn't have because they were running across the toilet, and now you've got somebody that shouldn't be in that race appearing on your screen, then you can go and remove that person's time from the screen before it's broadcasted, so to speak. So that's what that's about. Definitely leave this little checkbox on, clear local data. That just means every time that I do a login, it clears my members. It doesn't clear any results, so it only clears the members, the PBs, and the records, just to give it a real fresh look. So there's no legacy of other people's data that's going to stay there. So that's what that's about. If you are running handicaps, HC, and you want to clear it all and get a fresh grab of that too, then hit that button and do a fresh login. So that's the web tab. If we come up here to printing, there's a few options that may be of interest. Not everyone runs a printer these days because of flat screens is what I normally prefer myself, is to have a flat screen facing out, sharing my screen so that I don't need to print anything. The athletes normally only need to print off so that they can see their times, and then after that point that paper's potentially thrown on the ground or in the bin, hopefully in the bin. Otherwise, if you do need a summary ticket, this is more, say, for school carnivals or bigger events where they need a hard copy of everything that's happened. Then if you tick that on every time I press save, and I've got a printer connected or a PDF writer as my chosen printer, then it will go and create a lane, time, place, name, PB, record types ticket of that race, of everyone in that one race. If I want to put the club details in there, because not everyone needs club details and it does take up some extra room, then you can tick that option on. If I want the individual athletes to get a ticket, as in we've got a summary ticket which has everyone on there, but I just want to give them their own individual ticket, then I could have that ticked on. Also, if I want to print off individual tickets including blanks, so this first option will only print it if they are a known athlete. If there was a time and a lane but no one was a known athlete, then it would leave it empty. But if I want to print off blank empty tickets as well, then I can tick that option on. The default is the star ribbon, basically the 80mm thermal printer type diameter. However, you could use the A5 cross-country, XC being cross-country, where you've got other options here you can have a play with an alignment. So there's generally an alignment option here so that each print is a bit different, the way the paper feeds in and how the alignment happens. So if you need to, have a play with that. And then here is where you choose the actual printer that you're trying to print to. So make sure you've got that on if you need one or multiple copies when you do press print. So that's what's available in the print area. So if we come across now to the events in here, you shouldn't have to come in here in theory because when you do your web login, the events themselves will be selected in the background. However, if you've got something random happening on the day due to weather or somebody forgot to program in an event and you need to add an event in, so due to weather or somebody forgot to program an event in and you need to manually add one in so you can get the program sorted. If I wanted to find a distance event, then I'll click on the plus. I've got an option here for sprint or pack races, so depending on which one it is, maybe we needed to do 700-meter race, so I'll go and tick that on, and a 400-meter race for sprints. Then that basically will then allow, when I'm in those screens, to have these extra events in my event drop down. Shrink that back up and off I go. There's a whole bunch of different groupings, so find the grouping that's relevant and then hopefully be able to find the event you're looking for. Member list. This has the list of everyone that's been downloaded. So back here in web, when it says 295, this will be my 295 athletes in here. I can sort these columns by clicking on them. Sort it up or sort it down, just if I need to find someone. If I want to export out a copy of this, I can. And that's pretty well what this screen's about. Records. All the records that it says when I'm in the web screen here where it says record data loaded, 328 records. These are all those records in here. So we can see 100-meter hurdles, male 15 and 16 and female 17. They're the records that we're trying to go for or trying to beat today. Waves. If I did have waves set up, like mentioned before, in here where we've got the handicap, upload handicap times and waves and so on, then I'd have, say, wave 1 would be off 0 time normally. That's what wave 1 is. Wave 2 is off 4 minutes plus and so on. Then I'd be able to see my different groupings and wave times in here. Peripheral. If you've got any RFID units that are connected up or clocks that are connected up or checkpoints that you need to connect up and start lines, anything outside of your normal timing gates, start device concept or connection will be in this screen here, and it gives you all the different options that you can have a play around with. So I'll kind of cruise past this one and onto the help screen. So in here, if you want to jump into the help forum area where we've got different topics including the one you're watching right now, then you could click on this, go and have a look. If you think you need a new driver because something's not connecting or not working, then have a look in the drivers area. If you want to go to the center admin area where you've got to log in to RaceHQ, then click there. If you want to go check out the family area, and you forgot what the URL was to get to the family area, then click on here. If you want to open up the web start line login, so where you'd go if you're here in the web tab and you had enabled start line and you're in web but you couldn't remember what the address was to get there, then click on this and that will open that up. If you want to share your screen with us and do some live support, you've got some questions or an issue, or you want to show us something cool, an idea you've got, and sometimes emails or phone calls don't quite cut it, you want to do a live video screen share of what you're seeing with us, then fire that up and then we'll jump on at our end and be able to watch and interact with you that way. If you need to send us the backup of your files so that we can investigate an issue, or you've got some questions around something, and we need to get your data so that we can get on the same page as what you're describing, then hit this button here and it will zip up all the relevant files for the timing software and send it off to us. Okay, so that's a bit of a marathon. We've gone through all the different tabs, spent a fair bit of time on the general because that's where a lot of the normal day-to-day tweaks will be happening. But yeah, hopefully that's helped answer questions. I'm sure it's probably created a few more questions. But thanks for your time. That's the settings as it stands right now, as of the 11th of May 2018. There will be, over time, things added to here. But in the meantime, have a great day, and we look forward to working with you, and let us know if you've got any questions or any feedback. Thank you.